Welcome back to another New World video. It's the start of 2023. I'm bringing you a video I've been promising for weeks and weeks, maybe even months now. Loads of different people in my comment section are always asking for more tank and guide videos, since a lot of my videos are as the POV as the tank. I've been playing New World now for just under 2,000 hours, which is quite sad to admit, since launch. And I'd say roughly since March, so maybe like 1,200 hours, give or take. I've been playing as a tank, so got loads of experience in the game playing as a tank, and I'm going to pass on as much knowledge as I possibly can. So hopefully the point of this video is by the end of it, if you've never tanked in New World before, or you're just starting out, or even if you've been tanking for a little while and you're not 100% sure, you know, if you're doing everything right, or you know the basics, the fundamentals, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know absolutely everything. I'll try and timestamp it all down below as well, because loads of people have been asking me in the videos to do that. We're going to go through all the weapons, the armor, gems you should be equipping, the general build as well, all the perks, which includes all the weapon perks that you should be looking for. We'll go through your attributes, your food and buffs. We'll go through the heart runes. We'll show you a couple examples of tanking. I don't want the video to be too long. I don't want it to be like an hour long video. I'll try and keep it to 20 to 30 minutes if I possibly can. So hopefully a quick intro. But the last thing I'll say in this intro is I checked on my recent videos. 92% of the views came from people who are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to go and subscribe, if you find these videos helpful, that would be amazing. Like and comment down below, all that kind of usual stuff. And like I said in the last video as well, we hit YouTube partner in the middle of December, I think. So I appreciate all the subs and all that kind of stuff. So if you enjoy all the content and want more New World content and all that kind of stuff, subscribe. And then finally check me out on Twitch if you like, but I'll put some links at the end of the video. But yeah, let's get straight into it, and let's go through everything I know about tanking in New World. So first up on the list, we've got weapons. What weapons should you be equipping as a tank? And obviously what weapons should you definitely not be equipping? So if we got, and also what order that you should be leveling up your mastery if you haven't already. Like obviously if you're new to the game, you've not already got F into 20. I'll give you the order that I think you should be doing these in. And I'm also just going to chuck my camera up here somewhere. There we go, just so you can see fire staff. Not that we're going to use fire staff. Okay, yeah, so sword and shield, absolutely number one. You're going to want to level this up. You know, if you're brand new to the game, you're going to want to level up sword and shield as quickly as possible. I'm going to tell you now, I'd say in my personal opinion, 95% of the time I am going to be tanking with my main weapon as the sword and shield. Rapier you can skip. Hatchet, yeah, you want to be leveling this up. Spear, you want to be leveling this up. Great axe, you can do it. I barely use it, but you can do. Warhammer, absolutely. This is always my go-to secondary weapon. Greatsword, obviously fairly new to the game. It's been out a couple of months now. It can be used for tanking. Not my personal favorite. I do see a couple of people here and there tanking, but I'll be honest, even when I go into, say, Group Finder and I'm just chilling out and playing a bit of DPS, I'm still yet to see one single person apply to the group, or if I'm joining somebody else's group and they've used greatsword to tank, but it is an option, and we'll go through that. Bow you can skip, musket you can skip, blunderbuss skip, and then all of these on the right hand side: fire staff, life staff, ice gauntlet, and void gauntlet. You can skip those. So the main ones: sword and shield, definitely warhammer, and there's like secondaries: hatchet, spear, great axe, and greatsword. If you can just get those to level 20 as quickly as you possibly can, that way that when you change your dungeons and stuff like that, you can swap around your second weapons, do a little bit more damage. Certain scenarios require different weapons. So yeah, make sure you level up those weapons as quickly as you possibly can. Right now, onto the armor. Like, what kind of armor should you be wearing, and why as well? That's what's most important about this video, is trying to tell you like why we're going to use these. Obviously the weapons we'll go back to later on in the video, but what sort of kinds of armor should you be wearing as a tank? Now if you hover over this right hand side here of where your armor is slotted, you can see you've got a bar here that's got different weight amounts. Obviously the 13 weight and below is light. 23 to 13 is counted as medium, and anything over 23 weight is counted as heavy. Now if you hover over where it says, you can see 42.4 here on my equip load, this gives you the different bonuses that you will be getting, whether you are light, medium, or heavy. Now obviously when you are light and medium, there are certain bonuses, like your dodge, you can roll rather than just hopping to the side. You get more increased damage the lighter you go, and all that kind of stuff. Obviously if you're healing stuff, but focusing on tank now. If you think about the basics of tanking, you know, what is tanking? You know what I mean? Like the simple things, you know, you want to get all the aggro of the mobs. You want to be controlling them and where they go. You want to be staying alive. And then obviously little things out there as well. If you can be doing a little bit of damage in there as well, that's always a bonus. So if you look at heavy here, your dodge is a directional step. So we'll show you that in the examples at the end of the video. The stamina cost is 50. The block stability is plus 15% in terms of increase. So that's obviously a lot better. Outgoing crowd control debuffs is increased by 20% as well on the duration. I'll show you why in the examples later on why that's good as well. You obviously get a decrease in healing, but that's fine. And then for this is also a little bit important one as well. For 0.5%, sorry, 5 seconds after taking a melee hit, you cannot run. Now, if you look all the way up at light, for example, that's 1.5 seconds. So there's little bits and bobs in there for why you should obviously be going heavy. Now, looking at like generic set here, so you want all 5 slots to be heavy. You can mix and match. You can drop a light in there and a medium and it'll bring your weight down and stuff, but it's always going to bring your armor values down. If you can see they're just below the 625, which is the gear score. You've got the armor rating in elemental and physical. It's as obvious as what it sounds like. Any physical attacks that the mobs do against you, you have armor rating against that, and any elemental as well. And some of the elemental in the mutation dungeons, for example, at endgame, they do a lot, you know. So yeah, always stack heavy. Now, the next important thing after stacking heavy will be making sure you have got your ward gear on. Now, if you look on this piece of gear, for example, you've got ancient ward and it's plus 4.9% damage absorption against ancient mobs. So for example, every time you go into a dungeon or certain different areas in NewWorld, you don't have to be in dungeons. The mobs have types. Now, you've got like ancient, you've got lost, you've got beast, you've got angry earth, you've got corrupted. So whatever dungeon you're going into, as the tank, you want to make sure you got as many as possible, or when you can, all 5 slots want to have the same ward resistance. So if you're going to Lazarus, as an example, you want your ancient ward gear, and then when you change dungeons, you want to change it. So eventually, what you want is, but now you'll be good with Lost, Corruption, Angry Earth, and Ancient Ward. So you want 4 sets of gear. Eventually, they're probably going to bring in some Beast. There is Beast Ward armors in the game, so they're probably going to be bringing that in at some point, maybe a future raid or whatever, or future dungeon. So if you want to start stacking some heavy beast ward gear in the background as a last resort, you know, start doing that. But what I would probably say is there's more corruption dungeons in the game. So if you're looking to, you know, you're starting off tanking, I would go for the corruption ward gear. You can find that on the trading post as well. So if we run over here to the TP, you don't have to grab all of these armors from certain dungeons or drops. If you've got a little bit of gold to start off with, you can literally start by saying, so we go say for corruption ward, for example, don't get mixed up with Bane. Bane is what you would put on weapons in order to increase your damage against corrupted. Ward is the resistant. If we did only selected perks, for example, just using that one perk as a quick one. If we go to apparel, we go to heavy armor, and let's say we start looking for a headpiece to start off with, filter on anything from 600 downwards, and then as you can see, all of this armor here, you can start to filter it more as well if you want to do, you know, strength, con, all that kind of stuff, and you can also filter your other perks on there as well. But this is how you can get some quick ward gear. And what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to leave the link in the description box down below. It's going to contain my live Google Doc sheet for all of my equipped armor. It'll have all the little screenshots are in there, all the names of the items are in there, and there's a couple of different websites you can go to. I'll link them down below as well. And basically you can just grab the name of the item that I'm using to tank in a certain slot, and then you can search it on that website and it'll tell you where it drops as well. I'd be here all night if I was going through every single item where you can go and farm it. But obviously, if you don't want to farm it, you can go buy it on the TP. If you've got no money, you can go and farm it. So you get the best of both worlds. Okay, next, we're going to go through what kind of gems to slot on your weapons and armor. So if we open up here, when it comes to weapons, now, there's only one type of gem that you're going to ever slot on your weapons as a tank. And that's going to be the carnelian gems. If I show you one here, for example, cut pristine carnelian, that's the final tier, the tier 5 one. You can get cut carnelians at lower levels, and then the percentages just drop. But if you read this, it's quite important here, because I remember the first time we ever tanked, back when NewWorld first ever came out, somebody just said, get carnelian gems to me. And I went and slotted carnelian gems in all my armor and all my weapons. If you read in the center of the screen, you'll see why that was very, very wrong. So basically, the gems work in 2 ways. If you slot them to a weapon, it means that your taunts are active, which we'll speak about in a minute. And you generate plus 300% more threat. So every time you're dealing damage to the mobs, you're causing 3 times or 300%, whatever you want to say. more threat. Now, if you was to add one of those gems to your armor, so you could slot it on your armor, for example, it does the absolute opposite. So you never want to do that. You generate 10% less threat, and you can stack them across your armors and your jewelry. So just basically never do that. You only ever want to stack them on your weapons. Now, there are rune glasses you can slot as well, which is a fairly new thing to New World that come out a couple of months ago. Basically, they're like even higher than the tier 5 set of gems. You can craft them and you can get little buffs. So like you get a slight reduction in your threat from the carnelian gem, but then you would obviously then do something else. You do a little bit more leeching to gain health and stuff like that. I'm not going to go through them too much on this video. I'll mention them. Feel free to craft them yourselves if you like. The reason why I'm not going to mention them too much is they're quite expensive to make, especially if you're fairly new to the end game of New World, and they can be quite complicated because you get a different buff on each one. And then we did have a problem that when they first launched, basically the Taunton and the threat from the carnelian basically wasn't working. It was a known issue on the forum. I think they fixed it, but I'll be honest, again, another thing, when I play casual and I'm on DPS and I use Group Finder, I don't see anybody using the carnelian those extra gems. I don't see them using them, so I would probably stay away from them for now, and just popping a carnelian on there is absolutely fine. When it comes to your armor, you've got, in my opinion, two choices really. You've got the onyx that you can see here, which if we show you over here, when slotted to your armor, it's plus 2.5% physical damage absorption. If you imagine you're tanking, you've got all the mobs on you. Most of those mobs, I'd say something daft like 80 or 90% of all mobs that you face will probably be sort of like melee mobs, hit you with physical damage. So you want a couple of these slotted, in my opinion. When I'm doing the mutation dungeons, which is like an end game thing now, I just keep 3 slotted, so I get 7.5% reduction in damage from physical attacks. Now, what you would also do here, I've shown, or I brought one of each. So when it comes to mutation dungeons, it's basically normal dungeons at New World end game, but they've added them like bonuses and made them harder, different tiers all the way up to 10, just to basically make, you know, doing those dungeons a bit more fun, a bit more grinding, stuff like that. You know? So they basically have different mutation types at the moment in the game. There is fire, ice, nature, and void. So for fire resistance, you've got cut pristine rubies. For nature, you've got cut pristine ambers. For the void, you've got cut pristine amethyst. And then for the ice, you've got cut pristine aquamarine. Most players will slightly reduce or increase the amount of gems compared to me. I like to just play it nice and simple and easy. I slot 5 on my armor. So as you can see here, these stack. This gives you 6% of the nature reduction in damage, because on this one, we've got the ambers slotted. So I will slot 5, and then is that 30%? You'll get 30% reduction in all nature that's coming in. You add on top of that your ward, like we spoke about before. You get more reductions in damage there. And then obviously there's some things in the build that we'll talk about. So basically every time you change your mutation, there's another way to do this. You can slot, for example, you can slot cut pristine opals, which does 2.5% elemental damage resistance. There's another way around to do this. So basically, if I was to slot 5 of these now, I wouldn't get 6% reduction, because like, let's say the nature damage is elemental damage. I wouldn't get 6% per gem, per armor piece. I would only get 2.5. But there's a way you can do it where you get an amulet, where you would then, it's not easy to get, I'll be honest. So with this amulet, I would always want health divine, and then you can get like nature resistance or nature protection, for example, or fire protection. Now those amulets are incredibly expensive, and that's where you can top up your resistance. So have a look at those on the market. They are not cheap. They are not going to be easy to get. So essentially, just to round up there, always slot carnelians on your weapons. This is going to activate your taunts when we go through the build. It's going to increase your threat, which you definitely want. And then depending on what type of mutation dungeon you're going into, once you're at end game, you're going to want to slot these gems each time. It can be a little pricey, but once you're repeating the end game stuff a lot, you afford these really, really easily. Okay, next part of the video is down to the builds. So I'll show you the sword and shield one, and then the others I'll quickly go through because they're all going to be like secondary weapons. But sword and shield, we're going to start off with a defensive build. So the first time I ever tanked, this is what I used. It's a fairly generic build. You'll probably find screenshots of this here, there, and everywhere on New World guides and stuff. So I don't think there's too many other options you can pick. But I'll go through them. If you don't know how to make builds, by the way, on New World, obviously you load up this page here, and then you see the way there's like a line going across here from left to right. These are like different stages. You can't pick like a stage 3 perk here unless you picked at least one perk from the previous line. So some will be fillers where they don't really do what we're after for tanking, but they need to be clicked, and we can go on to the next phase. So we'll start on this left hand side. I've gone with empowered stab. Successful heavy attacks grant you 30% empower for 5 seconds. And like it tells you there, empower increases your damage. Now, we're not after specifically on this defensive side doing more damage, but in general, the more damage you do, the more threat you'll be causing, the more likely you are to keep hold of the mob's aggro. So in general, here, there, you know, where you can add a bit of increased damage, it's always a good bonus. Next one we're going to use is freeing justice. Successfully hitting with a heavy attack causes you to lose 1 debuff. So any kind of debuff you're going to use, like bleeds and rends and stuff like that. We're always going to be doing a heavy attack as well, because so these two just work nice. Then we're going to go over here to reverse stab. A stab attack that deals 175% weapon damage and staggers your target. The next one down, we're going to go for unstoppable stab, which now gives reverse stab grit. If you don't know what grit is, whilst you have grit, you can't be knocked down by the mobs. So it's always a bonus if you're not getting knocked down. Next on the line here, deal 10% more damage to slowed foes. In general, if it's not you yourself, but other mobs, other people in your group should be slowing down different mobs that you're coming up against. I was trying to word that in a better way, but there isn't a better way. So you'll be doing a little bit more damage. Again, a little bit more damage. You're going to keep hold of the aggro. And then the final one here on the reverse stab line is tactician. On a successful hit with reverse stab, all other sword cooldowns are reduced by 25%. That includes the shield side, okay? If you're wondering, well, what are you know, we want to cool these two down because these two are really, really big and important. Now, if you were to hover over any of the other ones here on this line, none of them actually really help you with tanking. Like, I've tried quite a few of these in the past. There's nothing I would deduct in order to add somewhere else, in my opinion. So these are the ones I pick on this left hand side. Now going to the right hand side, because I don't want to spend too much time on this build while we're on the defensive side. We're going with sturdy shield, grants an additional 15% physical armor, speaks for itself. We're going to go with sturdy grip. Stamina damage is reduced by 15% when blocking a melee attack with a shield. Again, you don't want your stamina on your shield to run all the way down to 0, because then you get staggered, and then it takes a while for that stamina to go back up. So that's always a bonus. Elemental resistance, again, speaks for itself. Reduced damage from all magical types by 10%. Defensive training, when you block an attack, gain 10% fortify. Now I want you to listen to this one. Fortify, okay, that's a really big one when it comes to tanking. Even if you're an aggressive tank or a defensive tank, fortify is huge. I think the fortifying limit is 50% on you personally. It's a small buff that will only last for a couple of seconds depending on which skill you're using or who's applying the buff on the team. But essentially, for every % of fortify you have is a % of reduction in damage. So if you go all the way to the maximum of 50% at any one time, you're getting 50% reduction in damage, or 30% or 10%. So wherever you can stack fortify, this is really, really important. Come down here, final blow. The third, this is actually quite an important one as well. The third attack in your light attack chain deals 15% more damage and causes more threat. Now again, a light attack chain is 1, 2, and 3 with the sword. So it's left click, left click, left click. You're always going to be doing that with your sword and shields. That's really important. Coming over here, gain 15 stamina when hitting a target with a shield bash or shield rush. That's one of our skills we're going to talk about in a moment. So we want that. And this is really, really important as well. And it'll reduce the need of the healer quite as much. Recuperation, we got all incoming healing, and regeneration is increased by 10%. Absolute no-brainer. Now, this is one of my favorite skills in the entire game for tanking, because it has so many benefits. You got shield rush here. Rush forward 5 meters, staggering and pushing back. Shut up, NewWorld. Yes, I am still playing, but I'm just in the menus. Pushing back foes. This attack deals 125% weapon damage. This ability has grit, and again, grit prevents you from being staggered by incoming attacks. So, quite important. Now, going down to this next perk here as well, improved rush. On a successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters are weakened for 10% for 10 seconds. Now, this isn't technically if you're tanking. It's just one of those additional bonuses you're going to be doing for the rest of your team. Weaken reduces a target's outgoing damage. Why would you not want that, you know? So not only you stack and fortify, which is important, that's reducing the amount of damage that you're receiving, but when you're doing like things like weaken as well, you're reducing the amount of damage that the mobs are doing. So it's kind of like a, you know, it's a double bonus. And then obviously Defender's Resolve. I believe this used to be called Defiant Stance. I completely forgot the name of it, but yeah, they changed the name I think when the Greatsword came out. Really, really important. This is the big one. This is like every MMO has basically this skill in there. You know, you slap your shield and you do a bunch of taunting. So for 8 seconds, reduce the incoming base damage from attackers by 30%. Really, really big. Now, this is actually different to Fortify. So you don't really want to add Fortify and use Defender's Resolve at the same time. When we go to the examples at the end of the video, I'll show you some where I won't use those two skills at the exact same time, because you want to kind of like, sort of like, use one like fortifying, and then as that runs out, use Defender's Resolve, and you know, so you've always got reduction damage coming in. Now read this part as well. So it's got grit, which we know about. Taunt gem compatible. If you have a carnelian gem equipped in your sword, this ability inflicts taunt for 8 seconds to all enemies within 8 meters. Taunt causes monsters to focus only on you. So obviously that's why we go back to the earlier part of the video where we say you must have a carnelian gem. There's loads of skills in this game that will add taunting so long as you have a carnelian gem. If you don't have a carnelian gem slotted on your weapon, then that part of the skill won't activate. And then coming down here, when Defender's Resolve ends, so after that 8 seconds, you heal for 15% of your maximum health. And then the sort of super ability down here, if you like, Defender's Formation. So while you're blocking, you reduce damage to all allies within 2 meters by 30%. Now you won't have too many people in your team stood really, really close to you. Ideally it'll be you, a bunch of mobs, and then like the DPS behind them. That won't be within 2 meters, but occasionally for some fights, such like the end boss Shardus in Lazarus, for example, you probably will be stood within 2 meters, so you can hold block every now and again if you see the big sweeping attacks coming in. So it's something to think about. So this is the defenders or defensive side of the build. I'm now going to show you what I use and something I would use once you get a lot more comfortable at tanking. You've been doing it for several hours, multiple dungeons, and now you want to start doing a bit more damage to help out the rest of the group. And then obviously more damage will also cause more threat. Okay, and then here we have it. What I currently use to tank with, it's a little bit more aggressive, like I said just before. It's a bit more damage per second, which also helps you keep hold of the mobs as well. The more damage you do, you keep hold of the mobs. Now, the point in this video isn't a cookie cutter, right? It's not so you can copy and paste this build and be like, now I'm a great tank, blah, blah, blah. You'll probably look at this build and think, maybe I'd still use reverse stab instead of whirling blade. I don't understand why you've used that. What's going on? The point of this video is to teach you the basics of tanking and the fundamentals of tanking, so you know what to do for your own personal build. So I'll quickly explain why I use whirling blade, for example, and why I switch over to leadership. The rest you pretty much know about. I would love to add improved rush if I could just deduct a point somewhere. So as you can see here, now the point of this is, so I want to unlock leadership. So instead of using what we used on the defensive side, defensive formation, we will use leadership, which whilst holding your sword and shield, the damage of all group members is increased by 10%. So when you come to doing endgame dungeons, mutations, there's time limits on those. Sometimes you got to do it within 25 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on how big or hard the dungeon is. So increasing the whole team's damage is really, really important. It is only 10%, but then again, you know, 10% of an hour, you know, you're reducing your run by sort of 6 minutes, you know, and then obviously if you're fractioning up a little bit here, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, the more damage you're doing, you're always speeding up your runs, and the faster you can get through content as well, the more times you can repeat it and stuff like that. So the whole point of this is to try and do as much damage as I possibly can, increase the damage for my teammates. So that's why we're going with the leadership side. Now, a lot of people would say, why the hell are you using whirling blade? Whirling blade does about as much damage as a light attacker, which is true, but you've got to think about it. This is why I use whirling blade. One, the fact is here, it inflicts 5% rend, which isn't tanking, but just hear me out for this part of the build. It's only gonna be a short part of this video. 5% rend for 10 seconds. Rend reduces the target's defense, so everybody in the group is going to be doing more damage. Now, you could also say, well, Liam, somebody else is going to be doing rend. Somebody else is going to be doing rend. Somebody else in the group is going to be doing rend. That's all you ever hear, right? But then if everybody keeps thinking somebody else is going to be doing rend with their warhammer or their spear or whatever weapons they're using, well, then nobody's doing rend. So I just like to top up the rend by using Whirling Blade. What it's also good for as well, when you pull several mobs towards you, you can use Whirling Blade. You'll hit pretty much every single one of those mobs, which means for 10 seconds, they're all receiving 5% more damage. Also, the more times you hit mobs, the more chance you have of keeping hold of the aggro. If you've got a group of, say, like 10 mobs around you and you're only hitting 8 and 2 of them are off to the side, you're not quite reaching them, and one of the DPS starts pinging them, or the healer's doing a ton of healing, those mobs are going to pull off. So the more times you can hit multiple mobs at the same time, the better. So yeah, I do use Whirling Blade. Is it the world's best skill? Absolutely not. Now, as for the rest of it, all I'm gonna teach you on this video now is to, when you're making your own build, read what the actual perk says. Okay, don't just go clicking around going crazy, or I'm gonna copy this build or whatever. Read what it says. Okay, in here there will be a reason why I picked everything. Okay, most of this is to increase the amount of damage I do, therefore to speed up our runs. But the more damage you do, the more threat you do. So there is a reason why I've chosen everything. You don't need to go through every single skill, but what I'm going to ask you to do now, if you're about to build your build side by side with me now, just hover over the mouse and just think, oh yeah, I do want to do more fortifying. Oh yeah, I do want to do more damage. Or you just read what the perk says before clicking it, and if it makes sense to your build, i.e. you want to be more defensive, click it. You want to be more aggressive and do more damage, click it. You know what I'm saying? That's how you make your builds in NewWorld. But this is what I use anyway on my offensive side of my tanking build. Now, as for the other weapons, like I said, I always pair, at the moment, I always pair with my sword and shield, the Warhammer. I'm not going to go through the entire build here, only one or two little perks, because this video will be an hour if I do. But essentially, if you want to take a look at this build, I never change this build whatsoever. I use the armor breaker because it'll do, I think, 20% rend to all the mobs you hit. Again, everybody's doing more damage. I use Wrecking Ball because it's a way to basically knock all the mobs down that are around you. Gives you a second or two to sort of breathe and not take any damage. It's also good crowd control ability. Gives you grit, which you like. And then this is quite a big one here as well, Shockwave. So we've added a Carnelian gem to our Warhammer, and then every time we use Shockwave, the big area of effect that it actually hits, you taunt all of those mobs. This is like one of the opening skills that I always use when tanking. I'm not even running into a group of mobs with my sword and shield. And examples at the end, I actually go in with the Warhammer and I use this to start things off. Again, applies rend as well if you have the weapon perk, which we can go through later on. Now, when it comes to if I'm ever using the spear as a secondary, this is the build I use as well. Again, it's only a secondary weapon. You're only going to switch to it every now and again. And the biggest reason why I use this is you get a crowd control with sweep, which means you can knock all the mobs down. Again, gives you a second or two to breathe. You have Perforate here, which applies rend to all the mobs that you hit. And then this is a big one here, Skewer. Now, if you have on your spear Enfeebling Skewer perk, I believe it does 44% reduction in damage to whichever mob you hit. So if you're doing a boss fight, so a lot of end of mutation boss fights, I'll switch my secondary weapon to the spear, and every time I've got a chance, I know I've got a couple of seconds free, I'll go bang, Perforate, applying a bunch of rends so everyone's doing more damage, bang, Skewer, and I now know for, I think it's like 8 seconds, I think, that boss will now be doing a reduction of 44% in damage to everybody. So this is a real big one. You'll see a lot of players running Enfeebling Skewer spears. When I'm using my secondary is the Great Axe, which is quite rare. This is the build I use. Gravwell, you can pull a bunch of mobs together if you don't know how Gravwell works. So this is quite good to just, you can throw that into a bunch of mobs and then you can go in and start tanking. What I would also use is Maelstrom, and I would go with the perk on the weapon, Enfeebling Maelstrom, same as the Skewer. It does a little bit less in terms of its enfeebling because I think it hit multiple mobs, but essentially you would Gravwell, pull the mobs together, you know, jump in, use your Maelstrom, and then switch to your sword and shield, and you've enfeebled all the mobs and they're doing less damage. And when we go over to Hatchet, again, I used to tank a lot with Hatchet as my secondary. A lot of people like to bang on about this down here, Defy Death, but I'll be honest, it's a bit overrated when it comes to tanking because you're only immortal for 3 seconds. And so if you go down to, if you place this here now, so if you drop Berserk, so you jumped over to your Hatchet, you gone Berserk, yeah, you got 3 seconds. You could be on 1 HP. You'll take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hits in that 3 seconds. Sure, you won't die, but still, if your healer can't heal you in that 3 seconds, you still die anyway. So I don't actually massively like the Hatchet as a secondary. However, when you do equip the Carnelian gem on the hatchet and you pop Berserk, this will taunt all the mobs, so it's quite useful for that. You can chuck in like an infected throw as well, which is decent, and a little bit of damage with Raging Torrent. But as a tank, I would probably never use the Raging Torrent or get enough time to use that, apart from certain boss parts, you know what I mean? And when coming over to the Greatsword, like I said, I don't want to go too in depth with Greatsword. I'll be honest, some tanks out there will main with this. I'll be honest, I barely ever see them. It might be something they use more in PvP, but when it comes to PvE, honestly, I never see anybody using Greatsword to like seriously tank. But essentially, left hand side is all of your added on DPS, but the problem is when you use the left hand side, you receive more damage as well, so you definitely don't want to be using too much of this. But I've just had a quick scan through, and these are all the perks I would use personally if I was ever to be using the Greatsword to tank with. I wouldn't use this one down here, which is the Shockwave pushes foes out, because you don't really want that. You want to group all the mobs together so you can do more damage to them and control them better. So other than that, I would use everything here on this right hand side, and then I would just pop in, you know, charged heavy attacks, have 15% armor penetration. Other than that, this is pretty basic. I don't want to go too much into this, because I probably tank for maybe like 15 to 20 hours using a Greatsword. I'm not a huge fan of it. You know, there are some basic things in here. You know, Roaring Ruptures, a pretty big one that you taunt. You gain 4 or 5. It's okay. It's just, it's not as safe as a Sword and Shield, you know. But yeah, look, I thought I'd throw the build that I would use if I was to be using the Greatsword in my build, you know. Let's talk about what kind of perks you want on your weapons in order to, you know, be better off with your tanker. Now, what I always used to say, the go-to starting tanking sword was something that's farmable from Lazarus, I believe, is Curiosity Greed. It's got Constitution on there, it's got Keen, it's got Hated and Keenly Fortified. So Hated is the most important perk that you're looking for on there. Anytime you can pop in a Hated, if you've got 3 perks on your sword, 4 perks on your shield, which we'll discuss in a minute, if you can chuck in a Hated in there, it's a nice little bonus, especially since a couple months ago they increased the actual percentages. So as you can see now, Hated on a weapon, there's 145% more threat. So if you can chuck in a Hated there, it's always a bonus. It's never massively needed, but a little bonus. So that used to be the go-to basic tanking sword. I would actually now say it's a Willing Sacrifice, a sword I picked up not long ago, simply because the 3 perks are better. Instead of having Keen, which just increases your critical chance, this time you'll have Refreshing, which reduces your max cooldowns, which is always a bonus. The more you refresh your cooldowns, or sorry, the faster you refresh your cooldowns, the more you can use your abilities, your taunting, you know. So actually, I would now say go for Willing Sacrifice as your basic defending go-to sword. Now, if for whatever reason you've not picked this up yet, but you have run Lazarus Dungeon millions and millions of times, you would have seen Curiosity Greed. There's nothing wrong with that being your defensive side of the build sword. So there's 2 in there. Now, what I would move on to for swords, and I'll explain why now, and this goes into jewelry. That's the reason why I've not mentioned jewelry just yet in the video. Deep Root is my absolute favorite tanking sword. So this time you've got the strength on there, obviously, but you've got Refreshing Move. Every time you do a light or a heavy attack, it reduces your weapon cooldown, so your sword and shield, you know, your weapon cooldowns, by 2.9%. But you're constantly slashing away all the time. Because again, the more damage you're doing, the more you're keeping the threat. So you'll always be doing that. This is massive. Obviously, Enchanted on there as well increases your damage. Not normally a sort of tanking perk, but again, the more damage you do, the more likely you are to keep hold of the mob. So open your DPS as a tank. The longer you've been tanking in New World, the more comfortable you are, is always going to be a bonus. But the biggest one, in my opinion, here is in Deep Root is Life Stealing. So you gain 5.2% of your damage as health. It doesn't trigger off damage over time, but we don't care about that, right? So and I average, depending on what dungeon we're doing exactly, I roughly average like 3 to 3.5k per light attack. So in the Sword and Shield, you do three light attacks in a row. So we're looking at like 10k, give or take, within like 2 seconds ish. You're doing 10k damage. Again, give or take, each dungeon slightly different amount of rend, blah blah blah. But yeah, give or take, we're doing about 10k damage. You get 5.2% of that back as health to yourself, which again lightens the load on the healer, keeps you alive. That's one of the key points of tanking. But when you go over to your jewelry, you'll see that life stealing and leeching will actually stack together. So on this piece of jewelry here, smooth bone ring, which I always use for tanking, you have leeching on there. So you actually now get 10.4%. So in every sort of 2 to 2.5 seconds, however long it takes to go 1, 2, 3, is it 3? Huh? Yeah, probably about 3 seconds. You're going to be healing for 10.4% of whatever damage you've just dealt. So stacking those two together is why I go for Deep Root, along with Refreshing Move is really, really, really good. And then again, because the Enchanted's on there, the more damage you're doing, the more healing you're doing to yourself. It's not a huge amount. It's not going to keep you alive if there's 0 healers or anything like that, but it is a good little perk to be looking for. So key perks to be looking for on the sword in general, if you're not going to be using Deep Root, have a look for Hated. Keenly Fortified is not bad because again, you're applying Fortify to yourself every now and again, which decreases the amount of damage you take. It's always useful. I can see someone using skills in the background in my video. Cheers, bro. Yeah, you know, like I said, Hated in there. Any kind of life stealing's good in there as well. So always look out for these kind of perks. If you can get some kind of refreshing or refreshing move, these are really important. So going on to the shield now, in my opinion, this is the absolute best shield, unless you can get absolutely particular armor, which I'll try and explain as quick as I possibly can. But essentially, you want to go tower shield. You don't want to go round shield or kite shield. They don't hold enough stamina sort of damage before like the stamina wipes out, and so you always want to be going tower shield. And then you always need fortifying shield rush be applied on the shield. So if essentially, sorry, if you don't know how perks work in New World, if it's a weapon perk, so fortifying shield rush as an example here, if that was to be on my armor piece on the chest, for example, it wouldn't be 33% reduction. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a lot less. I think it might be like 18% or something like that. It's a lot lower anyway. So always get your weapon perks on the weapons when you can. Obviously, if you're using multiple weapon perks, sometimes you'll have to then go to the armor. Now, you definitely want Sturdy Energy and Sturdy. Some people will be able to get these on your armor alongside ward gear. So for example, if you could find, say, a chest piece which has Ancient Ward on there and Sturdy, and then let's say you get a leg piece and it's got Ancient Ward on there and Sturdy Energy, sure, that's when you can start mixing up your shield in terms of the 2 perks or 3 perks if you get a golden shield alongside fortifying shield rush. But that means you have to micromanage every set of gear that you get every time you get a corruption set or Angry Earth set or Ancient Ward set or a Lost set, or in the future maybe Beast set. You're always going to have to get those different pieces of armor to match in order to get Sturdy Energy and Sturdy. So having Sturdy Energy and fortifying shield rush on the shield basically makes that a generic tanking shield, and you can use that in every single dungeon and you don't have to worry. All you got to worry about is making sure you've got the right ward gear in terms of your head, your chest, your feet, your legs and arms, right? So that's why I think this is best in slot on the shield, because it just makes micromanaging your gear even less, especially whilst we don't have the loadouts added to New World just yet. Again, the only way you can make this better is if you've got a 4th perk shield, which can happen in this game. They're incredibly rare. I think they've been disabled in terms of being able to craft them, so you can't even craft a 4th perk at the moment. Get really lucky. Yeah, sure, you can chuck on a Hated on there or a Refreshing or something similar like that, like the other perks we spoke about. But this is like the generic shield you want to aim for. This will be absolutely fine in every single dungeon. And we'll be using a shield rush skill all the time, so we'll always be applying that fortify, which is really good. I believe as well, if you hit a couple different mobs, that could actually stack, so you get the 50%. I've never always tested that because I've never had to, because we've never died when we think we shouldn't be dying. So let's take a look at that. Now, quickly on the rest of the jewelry, Blessing of the Forefathers, because I know we didn't mention jewelry too much before. It's always an amulet I will use. Fortified Recovery is really good. Health and Divine is the most important thing. If you can get Health Divine and then a 3rd perk, which suits tanking, that's absolutely really good. We spoke about Smooth Bone Ring. You really do want Hearty on there as well, because Hearty will give you that extra almost 10% stamina. As much stamina as you can possibly get, so therefore when you're holding up your shield, you'll be able to phase off those hold off those attacks for longer. Now, when it comes to your earring, you can play around a bit here. You might be thinking, Liam, you're a tank. Why have you got mana pots slotted in here? Well, this is why. Okay, so we've got Nimble for stamina regen. We'll speak about that in just a second. Refreshing Toast, potions cool down faster, sure. It's always a bonus when you can get that. But Healthy Toast When you drink a mana potion, gain 9.4% of your maximum health. Now, this isn't a game breaker or, you know, oh my God, this tank's amazing because he's got this. It's just a little bonus, you know? If you find yourself every now and again, you're running out of pots, your healer's not quite keeping you up, you're taking a ton of damage, you just get this extra slot to be able to heal yourself. And, you know, mana potions are really easy to come by. I've got loads of stacks here just from doing dungeons. So it's like an extra bonus. So you get the regen pot, you get the health pot, and then you get the, well, another health pot, really. It's only 10% of your health. So if you're rocking about, you know, 8, 9, 10k health, you know, 1,000, it's a little bonus, you know, it's nothing crazy. Now, going back to weapons then. So the rest of our weapons that I would use, again, I'll tell you the key perks, and then after that, you can just fill in the gaps with anything you like. If it's dealing more damage, that's fine. Or if it's getting more defensive side, like Fortify, that's absolutely fine as well. So with my Warhammer, I always want to be using Sundering Shockwave. So we spoke about Shockwave before, the actual skill itself. When you combine that with the Carnelian Gem, that creates loads of Taunting, which is obviously what you want as a tank. We got some bonus hated on there as well, and we got some Keenly Fortified. So every time we do a critical hit, we gain 10% fortifying. So there's a little bonus on there. But Sundering Shockwave makes every mob that you hit, you deal 14% more rend, which, like we said earlier on, not tanking, but what it is it means everybody else in your group is doing more damage. So it's like little bonuses that you want to be doing. On the spear, this is what I spoke about earlier on as well. I've got Enfeebling Skewer on the spear. So whatever spear you're rocking, you don't need hated on the spear and stuff like that, because you won't really be using it that often. You basically just be switching to your spear to hit some bosses and stuff like that, but you always want an Enfeebling Skewer on there. On the hatchet, for example, this is one hatchet that I like using. It's got refreshing, which is decent. Refreshing move will be better, but again, we don't use too many light attacks with this. But it's got hated on there and keenly fortified again, so it's a little bit of a bonus. I don't use hatchet too often recently because it's not as useful as Warhammer. But make sure you got a bit of hated on there, a bit of keenly fortified. Now this is like an optional Warhammer, for example. So we have hated on here, but what you'll also notice is we have Lost Bane and we have Chain Ice. So ice is good damage against Lost. I think nature's better, but ice is good damage. So this is an alternative. When you think you're absolutely flying and you've got all the confidence in the world, start changing your weapons. What would be perfect here would be Lost Bane, Chain Nature, and Sundering Shockwave, because basically that means you're stacking up all the damage as well. You're basically becoming like a mini DPS. You're not quite doing as much damage as the other light, you know, DPS players, but now as a tank, you're really starting to sort of hold your own in terms of the damage numbers, and you're helping everybody else do more damage in the group as well. So just like a little off weapon there to show you as an example. And we showed, oh yeah, the Great Axe as well. So I just use basic Great Axe here. I'm just trying to show you the Enfeebling Maelstrom skill that we talked about before. So for example, you chuck your Gravel in, pull the mobs together, you'd use your Maelstrom skill, which is basically like a mini whirlwind, and all the mobs you hit now do a reduction in damage for 8 seconds. So these are all the kind of perks that you want to be looking for on your weapons. Basically, you got to think about it. You're always going to be hitting the mobs. So what do you want to do? You either want to fortify yourself as much as possible to reduce the damage, or if you can enfeeble the mobs in any way with all those perks that we've just shown you, that means you're going to reduce the amount of damage they do to you, which is an absolute bonus. You got some leeching in there, so you're, you know, any damage you do, you're sort of healing yourself a little bit. They're not that great. And then basically, if you can just up your DPS in any way, because again, I keep saying in this video and I apologize, but the more damage you do, the more likely you're going to keep hold of mobs in New World. So there's all the weapon perks I'll be looking out for when you're making your builds. Okay, now for the part of the video where we talk about your attribute split. So if you go over to your attributes tab, so I'm not going to explain all the basics of attributes, because I think if you're watching the video at this point, you pretty much know how your attributes link towards your weapon and then how much damage you do. So I'm pretty sure you know that. But obviously, Sword and Shield, Warhammer, all these kind of main ones that we're going to use, they obviously base off strength. Constitution is your health. Don't forget, you get at each one of these 50 points increments. If you hover over and read them, you get little bonuses. And then these are some of the bonuses that we're going to look into. So before consuming any kind of food, and we'll quickly talk about the foods as well in a minute, I always rock up with 276 strength and 195 con. Now, the reason why is when I'm playing my attacking, or not attacking, why am I saying that? I'm sounding like a football manager. Attack and play. No, when I'm playing my sort of offensive build, I always like to go 300 strength, and then I think it's 211 con. The food I actually use myself is carrot cake, because it's strength and con food. So the maximum you can get, I believe, is always 40 attributes from your food. That's the maximum you can get. You can get some cheaper ones from like the winter festivals and stuff like that, like Spice Nog, but that only does 33. So you're losing 7 attributes there. But again, if you can't afford things like carrot cake or roasted rabbit with vegetables, which is con 40 food, I can't even say this, gremolata tenderloin. Oh my god, increase con by 40 for 60 minutes. There's also some strength ones as well, where you get all 40, but the cheapest one for a tank is definitely carrot cake. You can also craft this yourself. It's not that terrible if you do a bit of farming. But yes, if I was to consume one of those now, so I get my maximum of 40 attributes buff. If I come back over here, that'll give me my 300 and my 211. So the reason why I'm using 300 exactly is once you hit that 300 with the on the strength side, basic attacks with a melee weapon gain grit. So we're going to be doing that all the time with our sword and shield. We're always going to be using light attacks, melee attacks, heavy attacks, stuff like that. So we're always going to be getting grit, which means we're not going to be getting knocked down almost ever. There's some really big heavy attacks from bosses and stuff that, yeah, they can knock you down, but generically you don't get knocked down. And then you still get some of the key buffs here from the con. So all health consumables last 20% longer. You get increased maximum health by 10% of your physical armor. This is perfect whilst tanking because we have the most amount of armor you can get in the game because we're heavy and we're tank. We get a nice bonus there. Minus 10% to critical damage taken. Now, this doesn't apply in PvE at all because PvE mobs in NewWorld do not do critical damage. They will do more damage if they're hitting you in the back, but it's not critical hits. So don't ever put resilient on your armor, for example. Just a quick one to throw that out there as a perk on your armor. Don't put resilient on there. It will do absolutely nothing. It will in PvP, of course. 10% increase to physical and elemental armor. This is another big bonus. Now, some of these are okay. So minus 60% damage reduction when in full health. But that's not normally a problem because, yeah, that's not really one to look for. Plus 20% duration to stun, slow, and root spells. Yeah, we don't really care about that one. But I always run this. And then this will leave me with, what is that? 13,419 health, okay? Now, give or take, you can boost that slightly depending on, you know, what you've got, what perks and stuff like that. But they're the attributes I would go for. Now, if I was playing the defensive side of the tank, the build that we showed you first of all, I would go straight up to 300. Ooh, with this set of armor, I can't. That's a bad example to be showing you right now. But I will put all my points so I go 300 con and then 211 strength. Maybe even 311 con and then just plain 200 strength. Now, so 50, 100, 50, 100. Okay, here. Now, yeah, you'd be okay with 200 strength. Now, you'll notice you're not doing near as much damage as you would. Maybe more like 2,000 damage per light attack when you go down to 200 strength. The reason why I can't go any lower is all of my armor here is from this set is based around strength. Loads of my jewelry is based around strength as well. So, and then obviously my weapons will all be strength. So, something to think about if you want to mix up your gear. The only thing I would say is, as a tank, once you're comfortable, you will, you know, you will be ready to be running. If we just go back up to 300 here, you will be ready to run this, and eventually you'll start dropping your constitution as well. Maybe play 150 and go even higher on the strength. No problem. The only reason why I generically run 300 to 11 is I have 0 issues. Unless the healer is absolutely brand new and doesn't have a clue what they're doing and they have none of their own perks, or unless, you know, you massively overpull a group of mobs that most groups would always die to. I never really die whilst tanking, unless, you know, you get stuck in a corner or something stupid like that. So yeah, always run, in my opinion, 300 strength, 211 con, unless you're doing the defensive side or you're new to tanking, and then run about 311 con and 200 strength. A quick one to mention as well. So as I start a dungeon, as soon as we load in and, you know, we're at the entrance, I always make sure I've got my gemstone dust. You can get this by going over to the jewel crafting, and you can basically get rid of all of your gems and you can convert into gemstone dust. This is quite useful to pop. It definitely is a tank. If you can pop this every time you know you're coming up against magical mobs, you know, like bosses and mages and stuff like that, always pop this gemstone dust. Increases the absorption of elemental damage types by 17% for 20 seconds or until any damage is received 9 times, which means if you're walking up to a boss and it could be 12 seconds away, 13 seconds away, pop the gemstone dust before you go into that fight. And obviously you can increase this as well. You can go to tier 4 and tier 5. I just don't like wasting my tier 4 and tier 5 gems by converting it to gemstone dust. So tier 3 is about a good mark, and 17% reduction in damage is always good. Other buffs, so obviously we spoke about the food, so I would pop my carrot cake at the start of the dungeon, for example. You've got this now, a fairly new item into New World. You got Desert Sunrise. It reduces the duration of damage over time by 12.5% for 30 minutes. Your health slowly recovers while under these effects, so you get like a bit of auto regen. I would always pop one of these at the start of the dungeon as well. And what else have we got? Oh yeah, if you want to increase your damage a little bit as well, something we spoke about, even though it's not directly something the tank has to do, the more damage you do, the more you'll keep the aggro. Common honing stones, I would only ever use tier 4 or tier 5 depending on tier 3 or tier 4 depending on how expensive they are on your server. Don't waste tier 5s in dungeons. That extra 2% when they cost you like 200 300 gold a piece, leave them for the PvP war players, you know what I mean? And then obviously depending on what kind of dungeon you're going into, so for example, if I was going to Genesis Angry Earth, I would apply the Angry Earth coatings. You can get a coating for Lost, Beast, Angry Earth, Ancient, and Corrupted. So you pop one of those on each weapon. So make sure, so obviously if I've got my Warhammer out, you want to pop one of those like that, just in case people don't know about this. I'm just showing you just in case. You want to pop it on both. Bear in mind, if you switch to a different weapon, if I switch to my spear for a final boss fight, do you know what I mean? You don't have the extra damage, but it's not massive. But again, if you can just top up your damage, you're going to be helping the rest of the group, and all your groups are going to be loving you if you're more of a DPS tank than you are a defensive tank. So they're all the little mini pots and stuff like that that I would use before going into dungeons. Now, coming towards the end of the video now, we've got heart runes. Again, something, this is like a 2023 video. I wanted to make sure that NewWorld didn't add anything else to the game before the end of the year, before bringing this video out. Heart runes come out a couple months ago with the Brimstone release. It's basically an extra ability. You can call it an ultimate ability if you like. You can craft these. There's multiple different types. And but I'm going to show you the two, well, technically 4, but the 2 that I use as tanking. There are others out there, but in my opinion, these seem to be the overall best. So basically, if you're defensive tanking, you have 3 of these ones here. So you've got the Cunning Heart Rune of Stone Form, the Brutal Heart Rune of Stone Form, and the Stalwart Heart Rune of Stone Form. So Stone Form is one type of Heart Rune, but then there's like 3 sub tiers, if you like, and that changes the buffs. If you look at the bottom right of the screen here, this one has Mending Form. So all of them have the Fortifying Form. So gain Fortify on activation, increasing damage absorption by 10%. We spoke about Fortify, it's quite a big thing. And then you heal for 75% of the heart rune damage per second while active, but outgoing damage is reduced. Me personally, I only ever use this against Scylla in the Lazarus dungeon, right? Because when something you might not know about, but if you do, I'd go up to like 22 24 stacks maximum ish. I'm not going to explain that too much, but tanks who've been playing for a little while, you know what I'm on about there. When you get to that part of the game, or if you pop on my Twitch or whatever, we can speak about that in more detail. But essentially, this is a really good one to use because as the healer's running to close down the little orb, the floating ball orb, as you're fighting Scylla, there's that couple of seconds where she can do some big hits, take out all your stamina, and nearly kill you. And I pop that just at the right time, so it gives me a bit of healing as we're fighting Scylla. That last little bit when you're on like 22, 23, 24, maybe even 25 stacks against Scylla. So that's the only time I use that one. Now, basically, I don't use any of these other ones. These are what I first used when Heart Runes came out, and basically I no longer need them. But this one's obviously still got Fortifying Form. So this one's got Stone Form, explodes when it expires or when you press the Heart Rune ability again, dealing 200% Heart Rune damage within a 3-meter radius, but its duration is reduced. I'll be honest, guys, I don't use these, and I don't use this one. However, this one is very useful, the actual Fortifying one, because this gives you additional Fortify on activation, increasing damage absorption by 10% for 5 seconds. Oh no, I read that the wrong way around. Again, an additional 10% damage absorption for 5 seconds per hit taken, plus 30% max. So you'll get 40% Fortify from this heart room when you got a bunch of mobs around you. If you think you pulled a group that are a little bit too big, and you think, oh god, I need this, I need a little bit just to keep alive, you can pop this. Now, in my personal opinion, the Vines one, which you can get from Genesis, is just like the all-round In my personal opinion, some tanks will slightly differ. That's fine. Comment section down below, or add me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch, sorry, and we can discuss it. But in my personal opinion, again, I've tanked for so long, this is the one I'm most comfortable using. Essentially what this will do when it fills up and you can activate it, in almost like a slightly north and south and slightly wider of basically your character's direction, you'll drop all of these vines. Any mobs that are caught in those vines are then affected by this. So you inflict rend on successful hits of any of those mobs, reducing the target's damage absorption by 20% for 5 seconds, but also reducing your stamina regeneration by 50% for 5 seconds. So I wouldn't use this against a boss that does big damage against you, big stamina damage, like Scylla, for example, in Lazarus. But when you're fighting big groups of mobs, this is really, really good. In Genesis, when you've got all those mini mobs everywhere, you can just pop that in the middle. It'll also root them as well. Now, this one I choose to use has also got the enfeebling on it, which inflicts weaken on successful hits, reducing the target's damage by 20%. So when you pulled all these big groups of mobs, you've then landed this, which means none of them can run off towards the healers or the DPS if you've not quite got the aggro yet. But all of your teammates, all your group mates, they'll all be doing more damage to all the mobs, which is what you want. These mobs will then be doing less damage to you and any other mobs if you've not got the aggro, sorry, any other teammates if you've not quite got the aggro yet. I just find it like an all-round really, really useful. It's most useful when you've got a big group of mobs, or if you see 1 or 2 mobs just about to go and run for the healer, maybe you've not been hitting them and you've not been keeping hold of the aggro just quite well, you can pop that. It'll root them. Don't forget, it roots all the mobs as well for like it's like a second or something like that. Oh, for 3 seconds. Sorry, it's actually a lot better than what I thought it was. It roots them all for 3 seconds, so it's really, really useful. There's like a detonating one out there, and then there's a couple more heart runes out there. But like I said, guys, all round, this is my favorite for tanking. If you're new to tanking, I would gain all of these stalwart, the stone form runes. These are really, really defensive. They don't do much output damage. You might want to use them against a boss or two, but in general runs, you want to be using this, in my personal opinion. But again, comment section down below, guys, or pop into my Twitch if you don't agree. Give us some good examples of why you would use the other ones. The heart runes are something you can definitely play around with, but I do like this one. Yeah, in an ideal situation, when you're tanking, well, the guys would let me go first, but they did not. So I'd enter with Wrecking Ball there, and then Shockwave with my second, and then hitting with the Rend on the Armor Breaker, and then I go into my Sword and Shield. Just to show you the basics. So always make sure you're on the opposite side of the mob. So like this, for example. You go in, and then you want to get the opposite side of the mob compared to the rest of your teammates. And they don't take any damage. You take all the damage. So that's like a step 1 to tanking. These guys are just going to go random in because I think they want a fast run. Now, big groups like this is where you pop your gemstone dust because there's a mage in there. I'm going to pop my taunt. Pull them all to me. This is where I'd use Whirling Blades. You can use several mobs at the same time. Yeah, always make sure you're on the opposite side of the mobs. So they're facing you. All the damage they're doing is to you. And then all the DPS players can attack directly from behind. But yeah, some basics of tanking. Like, it's all about like stamina management. You can see here, look. At this point, I know this mob is not going to hit me, so I can let my stamina go all the way up. And just let it refill. There's times when you don't even have to attack. And then times when you get the opportunity, you can use all your rotation skills. Back to shield up. But always, key thing about tanking, it's the same in every game. Always stand one side of the mob. As you can see here, these guys should be all DPSing from behind, which means they're doing extra damage. There we go. Now, one thing I like to do as well, so in terms of like fortifying and using your reduction of damage from the Defender's Resolve skill, I don't like to use them at the same time. Because basically it's like overkill. So what I would like to do, or what I like to do on mobs, I'll show you on this next run. So let me just grab the aggro of these 2 mobs here. Now what I would do here, so I've now got the reduction in damage from the Defender's Resolve. The healer should not be standing this close. Now, when that time's about to run out, it's on the bottom right on my skill bar. I would then use the Fortifying Shield Rush. I'm just going to leave them over there because we're a bit overkill for this group. You see what I'm saying? So I want to like time the reduction in damage from the Defender's Resolve. Once that's about to run out, then I would use the Shield Rush for the Fortifying Shield Rush perk. You don't really want to be stacking them over the top of each other because it's a bit of overkill. I mean, if you've got, huge tons of damage coming in, you can do them. However, like I said, Defender's Resolve Wait for the 8 seconds to run out, then your shield rush to get the fortifying shield rush. So I'm just going to show you like a little bit of like sort of solo tank play, because the other group members, I don't actually really know what they do. This is how I would go in to a set of mobs. I would hit them with those 2 skills. So you got the Wrecking Ball followed by the Shockwave. Now I can use my Defender's Resolve skill. Now you'll see that's got 8 seconds on it. I'm going to wait for the 8 seconds to run out. Knock one of these down again for a few seconds. And then as that runs out, then you can use your fortifying shield rush skill. You don't want to overdo your skills. So you don't want to do shield rush, then Defiant Resolve, and then have a double stack of like reduction in damage. You don't need it. There's a couple of times you might find in NewWorld where you could do with the double stack, but it's honestly really not needed. Yeah, the fortifying shield rush gives you 6 seconds. So what I like to do, the longest skill for cooldown is this one, Defender's Resolve, 40 seconds. Now you pop that and you've then basically got 8 seconds before that ends. Then you're down to give or take about, you know, within a you're down to 30 seconds. You can then pop your shield rush, which is 6 seconds, and then you know what I mean, alongside using your refreshing move, you're just swiping away. All of those cooldowns should be coming down, so you can pretty much almost do back to back. You can do Defender's Resolve, wait for that to run out. Obviously I've got no mobs here to hit for the refreshing move, but you know, you're hitting all the mobs, you're tanking them, you're keeping them to the side, and then as that runs out, shield rush, and then your 6 seconds will count down from that. And again, you're hitting all the mobs, and not too long after your shield rush sort of fortifying runs out, you could then pop Defender's Resolve again, and then that'll work. So that's how I like to stagger those 2 side by side. And just in case we missed it, my overall entry when I'm coming in with these 2 weapons is I'll come in with a Wrecking Ball, I'll hit the mobs, and then I'll normally go to the back side of the mob, I'll hit the Sundering Shockwave and the Armor Breaker, and I'll switch to my Sword and Shield, hit me a few times to get the threat. Obviously every 3rd attack gives you the more threat, and then as that starts to run out, that's when you'll use your Defender's Resolve, and then you start to move on to the Sword and Shield. That's like my rotation when I'm using Warhammer and Sword and Shield. So yeah, there it is. That's the tanking, the ultimate guide to tanking video from myself, 2023 edition. Hopefully you guys found the video useful. It wasn't supposed to be a cookie cutter style video where you just copy and paste all my settings and then off you go and tank, because I feel like in NewWorld and in loads of games, if you don't understand why or what you're doing, you just copy and pasted somebody else's build. There's nothing behind that. Do you know what I mean? You just be spamming skills everywhere and hoping that you're doing just as good as tanking as somebody else. So hopefully you took all the key things that we spoke about, all things like fortifying, ward gear, how all your gems work, how your perks work, how building your build, how every little perk that you pick, how all that works, how aggro and taunt works. What else are we going through? Yeah, we're going through ward gear, we've gone through the enfeebling perks, the fortifying perks. I'm trying to think of all the different things that we've gone through during this video. There's just so much, but I'm going to try and timestamp it all down below. Like I said, I'll always be live on Twitch if you guys want to come over and ask some more live questions. If there's anything you feel like I've missed, maybe you can pop into my Twitch and we can talk about it there. Anything you slightly disagree on, again, comment section down below. You know what to do. But guys, like I said at the start of this video, 92% of the viewers on my last video were not subscribed. If you want to be an absolute legend, I'll never ask you to do memberships or are they called donations on YouTube? I'm not even too sure. I'll never ask you to do anything like that since this channel's hit partner. I'm not really after memberships and subs and stuff. I'm just after more subscribers, more views, more likes, and then sort of back and forth I'll come up with some more videos. So if you guys want more videos, just ask in the comment section down below. I think I've replied to every single comment ever posted on any of my videos. So go double check. I think I have. But yeah, guys, like I said, check me out on twitch.tv/LiamH. Sub, like, comment down below, all that kind of stuff. And we'll be back with the next video soon.